Hi there folks, it's finally time. It's finally time to put this Weber carb back together. Anybody who's not seen part 1, I'll put a link in the description. This carburetor belongs to Chris Stacey of IKS Exploration. Again, I'll put a link in the description. And this is from his Ford Transit V6. Now, I did rebuild the carburetor in the past, and there isn't a video somewhere else. Or maybe put a link in the description. In the last video I stripped this carburetor down, and it had water in it which had left a lot of muck and corrosion. So as you can see, I've given it a clean up. Now, I did actually bath this in phosphoric acid and rinsed it off pretty quick, which has got rid of all the corrosion. Even though it doesn't look very shiny, that would actually polish up quite well, as can be seen with one that I built a few years back. So the plan today is to get this bit built back up. As you can see, I have bought a rebuild kit. Now, sometimes in the past I've had these and it is literally just the gaskets, the seals, the accelerator pump diaphragm. This one has come with new screws, the actual power valve diaphragm, new floats. Those are actually the bearings for the throttle shafts. Now, they are quite a new thing. These originally just relied on these little Teflon bushes, which I'm going to put back in just so there's not an empty space around the throttle shaft. Stops corrosion. One thing I've noticed, it does not come with new idle mixture screws, so I'm going to have to clean a couple up. So let's get this back together. Right folks, let's get this carb together. I think the first thing to do, excuse the smoke, yes I'm a smoker, terrible habit. You want some bearings for the throttle shafts. New screws for the throttle shafts. Nice one. What else will we need? We're going to want that. We're going to want the throttle shaft. Oh, before I go any further, I'm going to put these Teflon bushes back in. I've already put that one in. Now these are quite delicate. Once in, they're a snug fit when they go in. Come on, dick fingers, get in. There's one. There's it. Don't know if you can see in there, folks. Where these sit, just beyond it, is a little recess where these sit, so they can't actually go all the way through. Well, not when the shaft's in place. Oh, come on. Right. New one in. Originally these were the throttle shaft bushes and actually carried the shaft. They used to wear out quite rapidly, allowing the carb to actually suck a lot of air in this way. So they're in. One shaft, we want that's on the end of it. Okay, so we have the a metal bush, we have a spring, and then we have a bearing. Which, there we go. So, what we need to do now is put the shaft through. The spring. You can see the bearing fits into the housing. There. So another bearing. Into the housing. Right, on to the next. So there's one shaft in. I've actually just squirted a bit of lubricant in there. It will just help with keeping everything nice and free. Right, next we have a spring and another spring, that one. Now this is the return spring for this, for the carburetor. It actually fits in there like that, and that one goes through. So I need to put that spring, I'm going to say it on there. We'll put a spring on the bearing. And put that in there. Nope, pushing the other. Come on. I've pushed my small bush out. That's no good. Let me just fiddle that back in. Okay, have another bearing. Get that in. And the spring. Get you to go down a bit more. There we go. Put the spring on there. And the washer. So we'll just temporarily put the nut on there. We're not tightening it up at this point. Right. Let's get that other bearing to sit a bit further down. Down. There we go. Right, moving on. another spring. And now we need to synchronise the two throttle shafts. It's about the right place. Did you put the spring on? I did. Line up the two lines. If you can see the two lines just across there. And then something to attach the throttle to. Now, they did supply a big fat nut, but the original nut on there is quite a slim line device, so we'll go for that one. And with that, we now have throttle. So next step, we'll tighten these up and get the butterflies in. Okay, first of all, tighten up this little 8mm nut. Now there's no need to go mad with these. You're not holding a wheel on. Now we'll just give the other one a bit of a nip. That's a bit slack. That's because it's 12mm, not 13. Right. That'll do, donkey. Right, let's have some throttle butterflies in. Now, as you can see, they open that way. Now these are the throttle butterflies, and these are actually angled at the edge. It's a chamfer. So when it opens that way, you look at the chamfer, it needs to be so it's that way and that way. So as it opens, it shuts properly in the Venturi. So we'll look at the profile. On this one it's that way, which means with the throttle open you can slide those in place, he says. Okay, let's put a couple of screws in there just loosely. Yes, the Phillips screws. Yes, this is a flathead. However, I'll just hold it in place. We'll get the next one in. So this one goes that way. So if we look at the profile, that's cut that way. If it was that way, you'd have issues. So we'll slide this one in. Yes, I suppose I could play some nice music and speed this up, but I'm a mechanical type engineering sort of person, not an editing kind of person, so just have to deal with it. Okay, with those sealed nicely around the Venturi, we shall just give those a bit of a nip. Just gently. Okay, that's those in, and they should work beautifully. With the butterflies in place, I don't like them being sat there because they're quite easily bent because they've no stop. So I'm going to wind in the idle speed screw. Don't know if you can see this, but in there you'll see the thread protrude through. And once it makes contact, which is there, we turn it one turn. And that should be a good starting point once the carburetor's on the engine. Right, moving on. Okay, next up, let's sort out the accelerator pump. Now that is removed from that hole, so I'll just pop that back in. Had all the bungs out, obviously, to make sure all the channel ways were clear. Okay, so we do have some new screws. And we have a diaphragm and a gasket. Now these used to always be a one-piece affair. Well, that doesn't seem the case now. So we have a spring, which doesn't go in there. I only had one beer, I'm not even through that, and it's having an effect. He goes in there. Silly boy Pike. So the rubber on, then the gasket. And put some screws together. Okay, right, we'll put one through that. Put the other one through that corner. And screw it in place. Try that with the other hand. Let's get the other two in there. Okay, that's the 4 screws in. And we now have the accelerator pump diaphragm assembly on. Okay, let's move along. Next up is the power valve itself, which goes in the bottom of the float bowl, in the hole there. And we just screw that in. There's a copper washer under it. Again, no need to go mad. Right, let's get some jets in this thing. We have the 2 main jets, which go right in the bottom there. I don't know if you can see that. They go in those 2 holes there. So we'll just get those in. With a selection of main jets, air corrector jets and emulsion tubes, and also the auxiliary Venturis, you can really tune these to your engine requirements. Okay, let's just give it a tiny nip. No need to go mad with the jet at all, folks. Okay, that's the main jets in. Next is the emulsion tubes, and it's these little chappies, depending where the holes are. Depends on whether it runs rich or lean at certain RPM ranges. And we'll just top those 2 chaps off with the air corrector jets. Squeeze them down. Oh, Chris, if you're watching, sorry this has taken so long. You know what it's like. Okay, right, moving on. Let's get the accelerator pump discharge nozzle. So we've got a couple of washers in here. I'll try and get out. There we go. So we have the little brass part of this. There is a little ball bearing in there. Give it a shake. Make sure you can hear it move. Okie doke. Let's put a washer on there. Discharge nozzle. Another washer. And put this in place, and this fits between the 2 Venturis. Let's just wind that in there. Give her a nip. Okay, let's now get the auxiliary Venturis in. These are what actually allow the atomized fuel to go down into the Venturi and into the engine. Make sure you have the hole facing towards the jets. Now, sometimes these are quite slack, but they do want to be a firm fit so you don't get any leakage, shall we say, where they butt against each other. If they are slack, what I've found in the past, if you get a centre punch and just put a little centre punch mark there, it shoves them tight. Right, let's move along. let's get some idle jets in it. So we have the idle jet itself, the holder, and some new rubber seals. So the rubber seals actually fit on there, like so. Another one. Come on, you retard, get on. There we go. Jet holder and jet together, and just slot in the sides there. And one in there. Just wind these in, give them a small nip. So that's the jets in. What have we got left? Idle mixture screws. Now this is the old-fashioned type carb, older fashioned carb with external adjustable mixture screws. Some of these are actually recessed down a hole. So put the spring on, we put it into the hole, and these won't wind in all the way in until it comes to a stop there. Now be very gentle, because you can distort the seat the needle sits against, and it'll upset the adjustment of the carb. So with that at a stop, we'll wind it out 2 full turns. And that is a good base setting for getting it running on the engine. So we'll just bob the other side in. So again, we'll wind it in so it touches the seat. There. And then 1.5, 2 turns out. So that's the idle speed and the mixture with the base setting, which I find is a good starting point. Right, let's move on. Okay, this is an automatic choke unit. This video is not about rebuilding one of these, it is just about the basic carburation. In my experience with these carburetors, it doesn't matter if you have an auto choke or a manual choke. The choke operation is for a few minutes when you start these old engines. I'm not being funny, you use them in good weather, you don't really need a choke whatsoever. But that's just my opinion. Okay, let's just get this back on. Where one of the screws goes in, there is a passageway going across to the auto choke, and there needs to be a little rubber seal on there. So rubber seal in place. We need to attach it back onto the auto choke. So bend it round and bring it up into place, and then make sure this is between where the 2 top screws mount. So we'll just get this into place. Hold it against. I didn't actually take the screws completely out, it's kind of cheating, but it does work. Wind all these back in equally. Okay, that's the Autochuck back on. There is absolutely no reason now why we can't progress to actually putting the lid back on this. Okay folks, we have the lid. Now we should have new needle valve. Get that out of the bag and wash it. So the bottom half, the washer on the needle valve. This is on the, not the actual needle itself, but the body of it, and screw it into the lid. This is. And then if we found a spanner, we can just give that a nip. Well, this kit did come with a new float, however, do I think I'm going to use it? I'm going to stick with the brass one, which you have here. But first of all, we need to put the power valve diaphragm in place. Now, I thought this might have come with some new screws, but it seems not. It's a bit of disappointment there, folks, but well. So again, same as the Accelerator Pump diaphragm. So, what screws do we have? Let's have a quick look for some cleaner ones. Okay folks, that's the screws through the diaphragm and through the gasket. And get it in place. This is what's going on here? Cheap Chinese shit maybe? Who knows? No, just me being a dick. Right, let's just give these a nip. Okay, with that in place, let's fit the float. Okay, let's get the float in. We hook the needle valve on there. Put the needle valve into its little holder. And then push the pin through. Now, to set the floats, it's the distance, I do believe, from that line to the base. And I'll put those, sorry I didn't have that in shot, so from there to the base. I'll put a diagram in now so you can see that. So that's pretty much back together. We shall just have a little plastic thing that goes for the Autochuck rod coming up. Goes in there, and just leaves a little fuel filter somewhere. There we go. Somewhere there'll be a spanner to give that a nip, but at this moment I can't see it. However, doesn't stop us progressing. Let's move on. Okay. We have one carburetor body. We have a gasket, it says. This is not the best service kit in the world. It really isn't. Right. Making sure you put the rod for the choke flaps up to its little hole. And gently sit the lid in place. He says, what is actually stopping this? Is that gasket? Odd. Yeah, folks, these gaskets are not the best in the world. I may put the screws through that now before I drop it in place, because it's not quite the right shape, should we say. And in all fairness, there's no excuse. I've actually made gaskets for these myself in the past. So let's just load up these screws and washers. Bob them through the holes in the lid. Okay, let's just put these through the holes. It should keep the gasket in place. Okay, so drop the floats in, bring it down, push the rod up into where it should go. And with a bit of a fiddle, it should go in place. And with that we can wind these screws down. Again, there is no need to really over tighten these. all that achieves is a distortion of the actual carburetor. You have been warned. So there we have it, folks. All that's left to do excuse me, is to put the little clip onto the choke arm. Oh, and I've dropped it, you dick. Oh, you knob. Just need to drop it. There we go. And that should simply clip in place. I'm sorry guys, but whoever put this gasket kit together didn't use the best materials. Well, that's a pesky little blighter in place. And that's it, folks. That's the carburetor back together. All we need now is an engine to put it on.